Welcome to my new rankings video. This is my top 100 horror films of all time. This is a very personal video to me. It's been a lot of fun making it. I deliberately gave myself a month to make it so that I could remember all the films I needed to remember. If I'd have thrown this together in a couple of days, it would have been a complete mess. I would have left loads of videos off, but I think a month was about the right amount of time, because towards the end of the month, the amount of films that kept getting added to the list became less and less, if you see what I mean. But I think I've got them all. Sod's Law, there'll be at least one that comes into my mind a week after this video comes out. But if that's the case, I'm bound to do it again 2 or 3 years down the line, so that video will get a chance to get back on there at some point. There's a lot of different subgenres on this. No one franchise dominated the whole thing. I think there's 5 films from one particular franchise on here, but yeah, on the whole, I think it's a decent list, and it's been a real pleasure to put it together. So let's get into it and see what's at number 100. It is The Hills Have Eyes from 2006. This is the remake. I've seen the sequel to the remake as well, which is not on the list. I think this first one was the best. I've not seen the originals from like the 70s and 80s. That's on my bucket list. But yeah, this was a good film. You can't go wrong with a good horror film in the desert, as it were. I can't remember if it's set in Arizona or Utah or which particular state, but yeah, it just sneaks on at number 100. 99, 47 Meters Down. This is a shark film where these two women end up stranded on the bottom of the seabed. And not only are they being threatened by sharks, but they're slowly running out of air. It's a really exciting film. There was a sequel as well, which is not on the list. That was almost as good as this one. It's a good couple of films, both unrelated to each other. Decent. 98, we have Scream 3, so the first sort of big franchisey sort of film to get on. I think this is a lot better film than people give it credit for. It's not my worst Scream film by any stretch. That would be Scream 2, which didn't make it on. But yeah, I think this is good, and it feels quite emotional towards the end of the film when all the revelations come out. Next, at 97, Piranha 3D. This is a really good film to watch with a group of mates, or if you just come back from a few drinks out and about with mates, come back, stick it on. I can't think of a better film to watch in a group, actually. Not so good on its own, but yeah, it's a good, enjoyable, funny-ish sort of film which just makes it on. 96, April Fool's Day. This is a slasher film I remember from when I was growing up. I saw it on TV. It really impressed me at the time. I've not seen it for a while, and I've not seen the remake. That's another one on my I will eventually get to it sort of list. 95, we have The Platform. I've got my brother to thank for this one. He recommended this to me. It was on Netflix. I think they might own it themselves. It's a very, very unique, original film. You won't see anything like it. It does make you think about society and stuff. The only thing that's lacking is a really good ending. If it had a really good ending, this could have been a lot higher than 95, but it's definitely worth checking out if you've not seen it. You'll never see a film like this again. 94, we have Psycho. I like all of this series, but this is the only film that gets onto the list. A very consistent series in terms of its quality throughout. 1, 2, 3, 4, all good films. But for me, the original is just about the best, I think. Although some people prefer Psycho 2. 93, Final Destination 3. This is the only film from this franchise which made it onto my list. I think the reason why I just about prefer 3 over the others is because I have a fear of roller coasters. I literally can't go on them at all. I have a fear of planes as well. Planes were prominent in the first movie, but I will at least still go on planes because I sort of figure that I have to, you know, to go on holiday, but I don't have to go on roller coasters. So yeah, the first half an hour of this film is very effective for me. So it's nice that at least one film from this franchise got on the list, because I do really like the Final Destination films. 92, we've got In the Mouth of Madness. This is a John Carpenter film from the early 90s. A very good plot. I've seen this at least 3 times, I'd say, and I can never remember what's going to happen because it's got such a twisty, twirly narrative, and Sam Neill's very good in the main role. Coming in next, at 91, we have Insidious. I thought this would do better on the list. On day one, when I sat down to do this, I quickly wrote down like 60, 70 films in the space of about 5 minutes just to kick me off. And the Insidious films were part of that original list. And I sort of thought in my head, yeah, Insidious will get on in like the 20s, 30s, 40s, but it just didn't pan out that way at all. It kept getting lower and lower as the month went on, and I kept adjusting the list. And in the end, it's only just creeped on at 91. None of the sequels get on, although I do sort of like them. I will watch them in a row if I ever do watch them. Coming in next at 90, we have Deep Rising. This is a really great sort of aquatic sea monster adventure from the late 90s. I wish it had done better than it did. It was a one-off film. It's got some great actors in there like Treat Williams, Famke Janssen, some of the guy whose name I forget. There's a few faces in this film. You would recognise them, but they're not easy names to remember if you see what I mean. But it's a really, really good horror film, this. 89, we have Gremlins 2. When I first thought of this, I thought, oh no, that's not going in the top 100. And then I kept thinking of parts from the film that I really enjoyed. And eventually I thought, you know what, it's going to have to go on. There's too much stuff about this film that I really like. This would be classed as a horror comedy, I guess, but I think it was a really good follow-up. It's not a scary film, obviously, but it does fit in the horror genre, and it's really, really entertaining, for me anyway. 88, we've got Hostel. I saw this not long after it had come out, and it blew me away. It was just a really original film. It was scary in that you could believe that it would happen in real life. It could do. Couldn't take my eyes off it. I didn't know where this plot was going. I've seen Hostel 2. I was really looking forward to that, but I thought it was disappointing. It just didn't have any good ideas. And I've never even seen Hostel 3. I hear that it's really bad. You know, one of those cheaply made film that's got like half the budget of the previous film. I don't know. I've never seen it. Apparently it's in Las Vegas, but I'm not sure if I'll ever get around to it. Coming in next at 87, we've got Maniac Cop 2. This is one of my favourite trilogies. I saw all of them when I was a teenager. My dad rented them out for me. Number 2 is definitely the best. It's the only film from the franchise that gets on my list. This was the highlight of the series. I've done a review for all 3 of these films. You'll find those in my Maniac Cop playlist. And I think there might be a TV show coming out in the next couple of years to sort of revitalise the whole thing. 86, we have A Nightmare on Elm Street, a fairly recent film. That I watched, because I've never really watched the Nghtmare films before, but I've just started reviewing them. I've done 1, 2 and 3, and number 1 was a great film. I can see why people love it so much, and yeah, proud to put it in my top 100 films of all time almost straight away. 85, Dr. Giggles. This is a slasher film from the early 90s. It was only a one-off film, but I love the villain in this. He's really funny. It's got a great body count, this film. Not what you'd call, I wouldn't say it's that scary, 1 or 2 scenes maybe, but it's just a really entertaining movie, and I need to see it again. I've not seen it in a while. Coming in next to 84, Silence of the Lambs. This is one of those films that I wasn't sure if it would make it on, because do you count it as a horror film? But the rule I went with is, if I was in doubt, I went on Wiki, and if it's got the word horror or slasher in the little description at the top, then I'll put it on. So Silence of the Lambs made it on for that reason. A film which didn't is Aliens. Alien made it on because it's described as a sci-fi horror. Aliens is described as sci-fi action adventure, so I left that off. That's the rule I went with throughout the list. So I was happy to be able to put Silence of the Lambs on because it's a great film. I first saw it a long, long time ago. And Hannibal is also a very good film. Not on the list because, again, that fell foul of the rule that I put in place, because Hannibal's described as something other than horror. But anyway, you can do it as you want if you do your top 100, but I just decided to do the rule this way for consistency's sake. Right, 83, we've got Cabin in the Woods. This is sort of a modern classic. It's completely unique. You'll never see a film like this. I wish they'd done some sequels, actually, because I would have liked to have seen different groups of people go to the cabin and touch different stuff so that we get different types of horror film. And I think the one that they actually came out with was a little bit dull compared to some of the other ideas that they could have gone for, but it's a really great film. Coming in at 82, From Dusk Till Dawn. I wouldn't say I love vampire films particularly, but when I sat down to do this, a few crept onto the list. This is one of them. I've always been entertained by this movie. George Clooney is amazing in this film. There are some sequels to this, but I'm not interested in them because they've not got Clooney in them. He is absolutely fantastic. Tarantino's good as well. It's got Salma Hayek in it. It's got some great action, this film. It's just a terrific movie. Coming in next at 81, we've got Near Dark, another vampire film. Just look at that cast list, or some of the cast list right there. Great film, directed by Catherine Bigelow. Yeah, it's absolutely terrific. Number 80, Death Proof. This is a special one for me because it was the last film I ever saw at the cinema with my dad. Tarantino's only done 1 horror film, but I think he should do more because he's pretty good at it and he gets it. It's an interestingly structured film, this. Mary Elizabeth Winstead, fantastic. And Stuntman Mike, who's the main villain, played by Kurt Russell, he is just brilliant. I love watching him. He's absolutely great. 79, The Lost Boys. This is a film I consider to be from my youth, even though I saw it in the 90s, because when you watch films in the 90s, the 80s films still felt quite modern, if you see what I mean. So, yeah, I always look back on this one fondly. There's quite a lot of vampire films in this portion of my list. It's got a great soundtrack, this film. I think they did try and make some low-budget sequels to this, but it's one of them. Once you've had the original film, you're just never going to get anything remotely close to this. Coming in next at 78, The Blob. I've literally just bought the Blu-ray for this, so I might do a review of it very soon. Again, another film I first saw in the 90s when I was growing up on TV. I saw it. It's got Shawnee Smith, who ended up playing Amanda in Saw. This is one of her early roles. And an actor called Kevin Dillon plays this anti-hero in this film. He's brilliant. I love watching this guy. Special effects are decent for the late 80s, though it must have been very hard to put effects together for a giant moving blob. Coming in next at 77, we have Crawl. This is an alligator movie. I love these, and I saw this at the cinema last year. I've not seen it since that original watch, but yeah, it's great. This girl she's a professional swimmer, I think, and she ends up in this Florida town that's been flooded, and there's all these crocodiles. There's not just one crocodile in this film, there's absolutely loads of them, and it's a genuinely scary film. 76, and this is the point where some people are going to go, what kind of list is this? Yeah, Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. The other day when I did my Friday the 13th movie rankings, this came 5th. It's a film I've always loved. I first saw it when I was 13, and it scared the hell out of me, and it's just stuck with me ever since. I know it has its faults. They don't bother me as much as they bother some people. If I watched it now, at my age, for the first time, maybe I would dislike it as much as other people do, but I can't change the way I feel about this movie. It is one of the big slasher films of my youth, faults and all. So yeah, it gets on the list at 76. 75, A Quiet Place. We almost got the sequel for this back in May. I was still going to the cinema right up until when the lockdown hit, and they had the posters up for A Quiet Place too. I was really looking forward to seeing it because the first one's great. I know we'll eventually get the sequel next year, and apparently they've already started writing a third, which is kind of odd. But yeah, these are great movies. Or at least the first one's a great movie. We've not had more than one yet. 74, Cube 2, Hypercube. I think the Cube series is sort of was a precursor to Saw, and there's 3 of them in total. The first 2 are really good. I wasn't so keen on the third one, which was sort of a prequel. But yeah, Cube 2, Hypercube. It managed to be sort of similar to the first film, and yet was completely different, did its own thing, had loads of different new ideas, and didn't just copy the first one. So yeah, definitely very good. 73, Triangle. This is a film that maybe not a lot of people watching this may have heard of or seen. Triangle means, Bermuda Triangle, because it's set at sea. There's all these weird time parallels going on. The main character is played by Melissa George. That's not Sackhead Jason making a cameo, by the way. But it's got such a clever story, and it is a bit creepy. And like halfway through, once you figure out what the whole deal is with the tale, you just think to yourself, wow, that is one of the cleverest stories I've ever seen told. 72, The Hitcher. My dad rented this off a friend of his in the mid-90s, and I watched it, and yeah, terrifying. Rutger Hauer, may he rest in peace. Brilliant in this, brilliant in Blade Runner. That scene where the guy is eating chips and he picks up a finger, that always stuck with me. And I believe there's a remake starring Sean Bean, but I've just never got around to it. Maybe at some point. Coming in next at 71, Cabin Fever. So this is a film that's almost got 2 subgenres in one. These guys who go into the woods, they're getting terrorized by these hillbillies, and also they're having to cope with a killer disease. It's a really good film. It's got 2 sequels. Cabin Fever 2 is a film I've seen. It takes place in a school. It's not bad, actually, compared to some sort of, cheap sequels I've seen. And I've not seen number 3, though at some point I will. But number 2 is not on this list, even though I've seen it. Coming in at number 70, House of a Thousand Corpses. I randomly put this on a few years ago, not expecting to like it with a daft name like that, but I thought it was great. One of the most original films I've ever seen. How many great serial killers are in this film? Most films struggle to come up with one good idea for a villain, but there must be like 3, 4, 5 really cool villains in this movie. Love all that stuff in the underground near the end with that weird doctor, and yeah, it blew me away. I have seen The Devil's Rejects, but it's not on this list. The problem with The Devil's Rejects is, when it comes to me, is I've not seen it for quite a long time, like 10 years, I think. and I tried to remember it as much as I could so I could justify putting it on, but my memory's just too vague. So I need to rewatch it, and maybe the next time I do this list, 2 or 3 years down the line, it will get its chance to get on, because I do remember it being very good. It's just it's vague in my head. I've not seen 3 from Hell, so that was never getting on. 69, 28 Days Later. Funny story about this is that I used to have this female housemate, and this was back in the mid-noughties when I didn't have many DVDs back then. And one night I was completely bored. We didn't even have satellite TV at the time. I knew she had loads of DVDs in her room, so I knocked on her door and asked if I could borrow one. She said yes, so I went in, and she had about 50, 60 DVDs on the shelf or something, and they were all just pure garbage, like romantic comedies and stuff like that. And I was like, what the hell? And in the middle of all these was just this one film that looked like it might be all right. 28 Days Later. It stuck out like a sore thumb. So I watched that, and the rest is history, because I absolutely loved it. But yeah, it was really bizarre how she had one great film and the rest of them were just absolute nonsense. Right, coming in next at 68, The Conjuring, a film I thought might do better. A lot of people have this as their best film in the Conjuring universe series. I'm not one of them, as you'll know if you saw my Conjuring universe rankings the other week. Yeah, it's a very good film. I just think there are better films in this series. Coming in next, we have Resident Evil, the original, from 2002. I love this series. A lot of people don't. I like the video games as well, and I know it's sort of a change of tone slightly into more action horror when you get to the films, but I think they're great, very entertaining, not scary necessarily, but I'm never bored when I'm watching them. So I'm very happy to put this one on at 67. Coming in next, 66, we've got Event Horizon. This is a film which didn't do that well when it came out, I don't think, but it's sort of picked up a cult following over the years. I don't think they had as much budget as they thought they were going to have, so they had to chop a few things out here and there. But Sam Neill is great as this guy who just gets taken over by evil halfway through the film. And yet the whole idea of the ship that sort of goes through some kind of black hole and goes to hell and back, it's just a great idea. 65, The Bay. This is one of the earliest films I reviewed in my series, I think like episode 12 or 13. It's a film about a disease which ravages this town on the Chesapeake Bay over like a 3-day period, and we get to see all these interwoven stories during that period, and it's absolutely fascinating. You just can't take your eyes off. Definitely a very good film, worth watching if you've not seen it. 64, we have Haunt, another fairly recent film in my life. I have reviewed it way back in like episode, I don't know, somewhere in the teens, I want to say. It takes place almost entirely in this haunted house, this really large haunted house that all these characters go to after a night out, and it's brilliant. It's got some great ideas, well worth seeing. 63, I Know What You Did Last Summer. I've not seen this for a long time, and I had to sort of trust my gut a little bit with this one. And it almost feels a bit unfair on The Devil's Rejects, me leaving that off when I've not seen it for a long time. I've not seen this for a long time, but I did put this on. I was more sure about this one. I have really good memories of watching it. I've never got around to seeing the sequel, which I hear is also very good. I'm getting, for Christmas, a Blu-ray box set that's just about to come out, a really good set with all 3 films on it. I know the third one's supposed to be rubbish. I'll probably watch it once and never again. But yeah, I'm looking forward to watching the first one for the first time in a while. And I'm looking forward to just watching the second one for the first time ever, so that'll be cool. 62, Escape Room. I saw this at the cinema last year. There was about 4 people in the screening, and I wasn't expecting much, but it's brilliant. It's really good. It's like a Saw film, but more about the tension and the scares than gore. Okay, and I think this is better than most Saw films. If you like Saw and you've never checked this out, you should do, because it's of that ilk, and there is a sequel coming out as well, so who knows, it might be a franchise that runs on for quite a bit. 61, we have Creep. Now, don't get confused. There were 2 films called Creep that came out quite close together, bizarrely. This one from 2004, about this freaky guy who chases all these people in these underground tunnels. And I believe there's another Creep from a few years later that's a totally different movie about some guy with a split personality or something. That one has a sequel. I've not seen those. I've only seen this Creep, and I think it's great. It's a British film. And again, I can only say, if you've not seen it, by all means, take my word for it. I highly recommend it. Next up, we have Stag Night. This is a film which really impressed me. I saw it on the Horror Channel a few years ago. and I've more than once given it out as a recommendation to other people. It's about these youngsters who leave this party in New York. They try to travel home on the underground system that's in New York, and they end up going in these abandoned tunnels and getting chased by these hobos. It's a great film. 59, Paranormal Activity. I've seen all of these quite a few times actually, but this is the only film from the series which gets on the list, the original and best. I remember when it came out, we were all talking quite excitedly about it at work as this fascinating new concept. By the time number 2 came out, nobody was talking about it at work, but I carried on watching them. And there is a 7th film coming out either next year or the year after, I think. They're in the process of writing it. Next up, we have It, Chapter 1. I don't think it's called It Chapter 1. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think the first one was just called It, and the second one's is called It Chapter 2. Anyway, I didn't get around to seeing this for quite a long time. In fact, it was only when It Chapter 2 was about to come out in the cinemas that I finally thought, right, I'm going to have to get round to watching number 1. The reason why I didn't watch number 1 in the first place is because I just didn't need it. I had the original series. I didn't really think there was any need to remake it. But once I did sit down to watch it, I thought, yeah, this is a bloody good film. 57, Wreck. So there's 4 of these in the series. This is the only one which gets on the original, although 2, 3 and 4 are very good as well. Fast-moving zombie films. The first 2 take place in this apartment block. Very exciting. The Americans did a remake called Quarantine of the first movie, and then they did Quarantine 2, which was just nothing to do with the Wreck films. But yeah, get into these if you've never tried it before, because they're really good. 56, Annabelle Creation. I wasn't expecting to like this because I didn't like the original Annabelle at all. But reviews for this one were quite favourable. So I sat down to watch this, and yeah, this completely restored my belief that, you know, good Conjuring universe spin-offs could be made. It's decent, it's really good. I've reviewed it, I think I gave it either 4 or 4.5 out of 5. Next, we have The Conjuring 2. So we've got back-to-back Conjuring universe films on the list. A lot of people prefer The Conjuring 1. I'm not one of them. I think the second one's the best, partly because we get this great section with Valak in it. And also, I just like the location, and I think the characters are more comfortable in their roles by the second film. So yeah, I'll stick up for The Conjuring 2 as the best Conjuring film any day of the week. 54, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3. If I'd have done this video a month ago, there wouldn't be any Nightmare on Elm Street films. I've only just started reviewing these. I've done 1, 2, 3, and I know there's a lot of people who can't make their mind up between 1 and 3 as to which is the best film from the series, but I would go with 3. I think Dream Warriors is the best one. 53, It Chapter 2. So quite close in quality to the first one, but I prefer Chapter 2. Again, that's going against popular opinion, I think, but there are 2 reasons why I rate Chapter 2 as being better. Firstly, I have the cinematic experience with Chapter 2, so that helped my way of thinking along that path. And also, I like the fact that Chapter 2 finishes it off. It's completing a story, whereas Chapter 1, you know you're not going to get to the ending. That contributes, believe me. I remember when I was watching the Nolan Batman films, I prefer The Dark Knight Rises. Again, going against popular opinion. I'm such a weirdo sometimes, but I like the fact that the third Batman film in that series is ending the story. It's more exciting because of that, whereas you watch The Dark Knight and you know that you're not getting to the end, just this kind of half-arsed end, and then you've got to start all over again. So that makes a difference to me when I'm watching film series. But anyway, I've gone way off topic. Right, coming in next, 52, Halloween 2. If you saw my Halloween rankings video from the other week, you'll know that I really like the Rob Zombie films. I ranked them very highly, both of them. Curiously, there's only 3 Halloween films in my top 100. I thought there would be more, given that it's my favourite horror series of all time. Maybe I just don't enjoy the majority of the sequels as much as I thought compared to other great horror films. But yeah, I think Rob Zombie's 2 were great, or at least I thought so. I know they kind of divided opinion. 51, The Ring. I reviewed the Japanese version of The Ring way back in episode, I don't know, 11 or 12 of my series. I gave it a good score. I mentioned the American version of the film in that review as well, and I prefer the Americans series because it's just easy to understand. You've got 3 films, 1, 2, 3. On the Japanese side, it's hard to follow what they're doing after the original film. You've got sequels, you've got second attempts at doing the same sequel, you've got sidequels and prequels and mashups with characters from other series. It's really confusing. Honestly, I just didn't want to go there after I'd watched the first film. Coming in at number 50, Annabelle Comes Home. In my opinion, the best of the Conjuring universe films. I don't think many people share that opinion, but I reviewed this recently. I couldn't find any fault with it whatsoever. I just thought it was a perfect movie. I think I gave it 4.5 out of 5. Not quite masterpiece territory. On the whole, I will say, given this is the last Conjuring Universe film on the list, I'm surprised that they didn't come higher, like 20s, 30s. But I kept remembering horror films that I just value more. So yeah, this is the highest placed Conjuring Universe film, number 50, Annabelle Comes Home. Even though, when I did my top 40 movie franchises the other week, I ranked the Conjuring franchise at number 6. It's weird how it works out sometimes. 49, The Zombie Diaries. This is another tip from my brother, which was gratefully received. It's a UK set zombie film. There's 2 of them in the series, though this is the only one that's on the list. It's sort of like the Pulp Fiction of zombie films. You've got 3 stories back to back, and then they're all interlinked in really clever ways. If you've never seen it, check it out. 48, Underworld. This is the only Underworld film on the list. It's weird for me, this series, because I only really end up watching 1 and 2 whenever I sit down to marathon them. 3 kind of takes me out of the series a bit because it's a different actress. It's not a bad film. It's just weird after you've watched the first 2 with Kate Beckinsale. The 4th one brings Kate Beckinsale back. I like that one. I've only seen it once. And the 5th one, I've never got around to it. It's a difficult series to watch loads of them at once, I find. Although I always end up going back to them at some point. It's good, especially this first one. It's got a very kind of Gotham type feel, the way that they've designed this place. 47, the original Friday the 13th, the film which has just become better and better for me over the years, even though it's got no Jason in it. If you saw my Friday the 13th rankings the other week, you'll know that this came very high, 4th spot, and yeah, very good film. 46, Wrong Turn 2, Dead End. This is the only Wrong Turn film on my list, although I do like all of the movies. They're making a 7th one, which is a reboot. But for my money, Wrong Turn 2 is the outstanding film in this franchise. It was direct-to-video, but it's brilliant. It's gory and funny and entertaining, and you won't go wrong with this one. 45, Scream 4. This was a brilliant return for the Scream franchise. I think having that 11-year rest really did help this film. It just feels like they've got so many new ideas. They've got great new killers, great new good characters as well, like Kirby. And for my money, it's the 2nd best Scream film after the original. And I'm really looking forward to Scream 5. Number 44, Deep Blue Sea. Now, at this point, let me say that Jaws is not in my top 100. I like Jaws. I respect it. Maybe I've seen it too many times throughout my life. I don't know. It almost made it into my top 100, not quite. I prefer Deep Blue Sea. That's just me. I'm a bit of a weirdo, maybe. But yeah, this is a shark film set in an aquatic research centre. It's very exciting. It's got a good budget, this film. Good actors, Samuel L. Jackson and a bunch of other guys. There is a 2 and 3, which I believe are much lower budget. I am going to get around to watching those at some point. I might review the series. 43, Cube. So if you like the Saw films and you've never seen Cube, you should go and watch them. Yeah, so we had Cube 2 way back in the 70s on this list. Now we get the original film a lot higher. This one is better, but I love both of them, Cube 1 and 2. They are great. 42, we have Halloween. So we had Halloween 2, Rob Zombie's version of Halloween 2, way back at like 51, 52. Now we get the other one in the 40s, although they're very, very close together, I should say. I just love Rob Zombie's Halloween 1 and 2, and they almost made a number 3. It did get greenlit, and then they had to cancel it almost as soon as they had greenlit it, sadly, because the company was running out of money. But I would have loved to have seen a Halloween 3 done by Rob Zombie. 41, 28 weeks later. Some people may prefer 28 days later. I had that down at like 66, 67, I think. I just think this one's got better actors, it's got better action, completely unpredictable plot, and it's always made me sad that they never ended up making a 3rd one. Coming in at number 40, VHS. This is a horror anthology film, and it gets on the list because all of the stories in this film are brilliant. I really like them. The only thing that lets it down is that the wraparound story is just a bit weird. It's a bunch of criminals in this dark house. A bunch of random stuff happens between each of the main stories. But yeah, if it had a good wraparound story, this film could have done even higher. I've seen VHS 2. It's not on this list. It's not quite as good, but it's still watchable. And VHS Viral is a film I bought on the cheap once, and I've never watched it. It's just sat on the shelf. At some point, I must watch it. 39, Sinister. This is a 2-film series. The first one really creeps me out. Those homemade videotape things with you can't see the killer on there, and there's these weird little musical things going on. Yeah, good movie. And I liked it so much, I went to see the second one at the cinema. I liked that almost as much, although it obviously wasn't doing anything original the second time around. I don't think it did as well as the at the box office, so they've never made any more. But yeah, I like Sinister. 38, Cloverfield. This is a 3-film series, but this is the only one which gets on my list. I've not seen the second and third films, which I believe are wildly different to the original Cloverfield film anyway. But yeah, this is some tale, this. I mean, all these people at this party suddenly realise that the city's falling to bits around them because there's this giant monster, and everybody's panicking and pushing each other to get out, and they don't know whether to go back and save friends or just escape any way they can. It's an exciting film. 37, House on Society Row. I saw this on TV in the 90s, and it had a different title. It was called House of Evil. And when I then left home many years later and sought to buy it, I couldn't find it because I was looking for House of Evil, and no such film existed anywhere anymore. And it was only a long time after that that I randomly discovered that it has a different name. Why they changed the name so late on, I don't understand. Or is it just a UK thing? We had it known as House of Evil for such a long time. But anyway, I like the film a lot. It's got a very Friday the 13th sort of vibe. And yeah, you should watch this one. If you like slasher films, you've got to check this one out. Coming in next at 36, another slasher film from the early 80s. This is Hell Night. Linda Blair there, dressed in a weird kind of way. But this has got so much atmosphere, this film. I saw this when I was a teenager, and yeah, it was really creepy. I loved the first few kills, especially in this one. 35, Inferno. This is the sequel to Suspiria, but it's not as well known as Suspiria. It should be, because it's great. Some of it's set in Rome. It's got great music, great atmosphere, and a fairly recent one for me. I think I only saw it sort of a year ago, maybe less. 34, we have Race with the Devil. This is a film that came out in the 70s. It's about these two couples who, they go on this camping holiday in Texas, I think, but they stumble across this cult who are sacrificing this blonde girl on top of this bonfire, and they flee, but the cultists spot them. So there's this whole chase thing going on across Texas, and it's extremely exciting. 33, Midsummer, a recent one. I thought this was great when I saw it. I saw it at the cinema, and there's an extended version that's come out on Blu-ray. I've not seen the extended version. Just the theatrical cut alone gets on this list. The other really popular film that this guy did, Ari Aster, Hereditary, I saw that and wasn't as impressed by it. It's not in the top 100. Some people think Hereditary is the better of the two movies, but I don't know. For me, loved Midsommar. Wasn't so hot on Hereditary. 32, The Burning, one of the best slasher films ever made. Another early 80s one. It was a great era. Yeah, this has definitely got the Friday the 13th vibe again, being set, you know, at summer camp. And yeah, look at the makeup job on this guy. Absolutely terrific. Tom Savini doing some great work, as he always does. 31, Demons. I first saw this at school, bizarrely. Last day of term, when I was about 14, we were allowed to just watch a random video if somebody brought one in. I think only one person actually did, or only one person remembered, and they brought Demons in, bizarrely, and the teacher let us watch it. Probably shouldn't. After 10 minutes, nobody was watching the movie. People just sat around talking. There was just me sat there watching it. I thought it was really good. And as soon as I was old enough to buy it for myself, I did. And I love this film. All these people trapped in this cinema, and they slowly, one by one, they start turning into demons. It's got a great soundtrack as well. Demons 2 is not quite as good, although it is still watchable. It's not on this list. Right, into the top 30, Resident Evil Afterlife. This is one of those moments where I think people will be going, oh, Resident Evil Afterlife, really? Yeah, I just love this film. It's really entertaining. It is a bit kind of style over substance, if you like, but it's a guilty pleasure of mine. And it's followed on this list by Resident Evil Apocalypse. In my first draft for this top 100, Afterlife and Apocalypse ended up side by side, and they're so close together in quality for me that at no point when I was adding more and more films to the list could I find a film that would fit between these two. So they are together. But sometimes on a list like this, you get films from the same franchise that just end up bunched together. I think Annabelle Creation, The Conjuring 2 was another pair that ended up together, sort of like 54 and 55th on the list, something like that. But yeah, I love Apocalypse, and I think the reason why this one gets the nod over Afterlife is the fact that it's just got the Nemesis in it, I think. I love the portrayal of the Nemesis in this film. But this is the last Resident Evil film in my top 100. So if you're not a fan of the series, you can rest assured that this is the last time you're going to see a Paul Anderson movie on here, I think. 28, Doctor Sleep. Now, it might offend some people to realise it, but I do not have The Shining in the top 100. I have seen it. I saw it when I was a teenager, but back when I was that young, I didn't really appreciate those sorts of movies. I was into more, you know, slasher films, stuff where there's a lot happening in them. If I watched The Shining today, I would probably appreciate it a lot more. Maybe it would get into my top 100. It's something that I need to do at some point, I think, because it's been a long time since that first viewing. But Doctor Sleep, saw it at the cinema, thought it was great. And this is another one, like Midsummer. They've released an extended cut, which I think is about half an hour longer than the theatrical version, but I've not got around to watching it. But just the theatrical cut alone gets on this list. Maybe after I've seen the extended version, it could even rise higher. I don't know. 27, Alien 3. Let me be specific about this. The Alien 3 assembly cut. If it had been the theatrical cut, this film would not have even made the top 100. I thought it was a mediocre film for a long time. Watching the extended version with like almost half an hour extra put into it really improved this film. And now I almost put it as good as the first two. 26, Prince of Darkness. This is a John Carpenter classic. It sort of plays out like a slasher film. It's got Donald Pleasance as this priest guy. Alice Cooper's in it as this weird hobo. And yeah, it's a creepy film. It's got a great soundtrack. An underrated movie, to be sure. 25, As Above, So Below. I wish more people talk about this film because it's great. And this girl here is one of my favourite horror characters of all time, even though she's only in one movie. It's so funny watching her be so obsessed with going on all these archaeological adventures and stuff. I would have loved to have seen her do more movies where she's, you know, going after different pursuits, a bit like a Lara Croft type character, or that bloke from the Da Vinci Code or something like that. I think in this film she's after the Rosetta Stone below the streets of Paris, but it's a scary film and definitely worthy of 25th place on my list anyway. 24, Gremlins. We had Gremlins 2, didn't we, way back at 89, I think, but I always favour the original because it's got more horror, I think. But I do love them both, but yeah, quite a gap between 1 and 2 actually on the list now that I think about it. But yeah, both films were films from my childhood. I watched them so many times growing up. Not so much in recent years, which makes me think I'm going to have to get them soon, I think. 23, The Invisible Man. Probably the only film on this list with 2020 in the brackets, I think. But yeah, this blew me away when I watched it because I wasn't looking forward to it that much when I went to see it at the cinema. It was kind of one of those films you just watch because it's the only thing on that particular week, but you desperately want to get out of the house and go to the cinema. So yeah, within 5 minutes of this film, I was absolutely gripped, watching this girl trying to escape from her abusive boyfriend. It's a ride, this movie. It really is. There's so much tension. It's a genuinely scary film. The word scary is used too much. I use the word scary too much, to be honest, but it applies in this case. Great film. 22, It Follows. I saw this the same week as The Babadook a few years ago. I was going through a process of taking recommendations from like Facebook groups and things, and so these two movies were very highly spoken of. I checked out both of them, loved It Follows, didn't like The Babadook at all. But yeah, It Follows is just one of those great one-off horror films. It doesn't need a sequel, probably won't ever get a sequel, doesn't need a sequel. Just the first one alone is a brilliant film. 21, Friday the 13th, Part 2. There's Sackhead Jason. Great final girl in this film. It's really creepy. The series still feels really fresh when they're on Part 2. And yeah, I just love this movie. It's just a terrific one. And very unlucky not to get into the top 20, it has to be said. Next up is Saw 2. For my money, the best Saw film by a mile. It's the only Saw film on this list. I saw it at the cinema with some friends and it completely blew us away. We went straight to the pub afterwards and just sat for like 2 or 3 pints discussing all the twists from the film and what we thought would happen in Saw 3. It was a really exciting night. Saw 3 itself was probably unlucky not to make the top 100. It almost did. I'm looking forward to Spiral when it comes out next year, by the way. 19, the original Wolf Creek, the only Wolf Creek film to get on this list. I love this series. I like the TV show as well. Funny story about this film is that the first time I saw it was around at my brother's house. He used to live with these girls in a nearby city, and the night that we watched it, there was only me and my brother in the house, and we got about halfway through the film, and suddenly all these girls came home, ploughed their way into the living room, sat quite close to us, started yakking really loudly to the point where I couldn't hear the film anymore. on the inside I was seething. I was like, I'm watching a great film here, leave us alone. But I mean, it's not my house, you can't say anything, so just had to suffer it. And a few weeks later, I think, I sought the film out, watched it properly, and I thought it was amazing. I think it's a masterpiece, this film. This guy, Mick Taylor, he's just one of the scariest killers ever. 18, Suspiria. So we had Inferno back at 35. The original film, though, is the best for me. So colourful, it's got a great soundtrack. Atmosphere is electric. There's 4 films in this series overall, if you count the remake, and I really like them all, although Suspiria and Inferno are the only 2 which make it onto my list. We're getting into the real masterpiece films now. 17, the original Evil Dead. This is my favourite of the series. I reviewed the Evil Dead remake very well recently, gave it 4.5 out of 5. I just couldn't quite bring myself to put the remake on the top 100 list. Maybe I just need to digest it a bit longer. So this is the only one that makes it on. I like the Evil Dead when it's been more serious than comedic, like in Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness. A lot of people think Evil Dead 2 is better than number 1, but I'm not one of them. For me, original and best is this one. And I saw it at the cinema recently. I had that privilege, my local cinema, because they've got no new films to show. They're showing loads of old classics. So I got to see Halloween at the cinema. I got to see Evil Dead 1 at the cinema, and that was a real privilege. Coming in at number 16, Friday the 13th, Part 6. I saw this when I was a teenager and it had a big effect on me. I loved the Alice Cooper song at the end. There is a bit more humour in this Friday film than a lot of the others, but it works as a great horror film regardless of the humour. But certainly, this is a film that I would tend to recommend if you're just starting out with the Friday the 13th films. I'm not sure that watching number 1 would really get you into it. I would say start with Part 6, get a good idea of Jason, and then, you know, go backwards or forwards depending on what sort of Friday the 13th you want there afterwards. Coming in at 15, The Mummy, but you probably didn't expect to see this film on here. I saw this at the cinema with a friend of mine when it came out, and I loved it. It was way better than I thought it was going to be. The sequel makes me a little bit sad. I've made my peace with it in recent years, but at the time that I rented it, I was so excited to see it, and I just didn't enjoy it at all. They doubled down on the comedy and just forgot about the horror. I don't know why studios do this. When they have a good thing going, they feel like they have to increase the comedy part and forget about whatever else made that film good. And this is one of those series that fell to that fate, I guess. But this first film is terrific, and the horror was what made it great. The humour was just a bonus, you know. But yeah, gotta love The Mummy. 14, Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter. This is the highest ranking Jason film on my list. So we've had quite a few of them around about this part of the list. We've just had Part 6 and Part 2 recently. So this is at 14th. We had Part 6 at 16th, and we had Part 2 at 21st. But yeah, this is the best in my eyes, as you'll already know if you've seen my recent Friday the 13th rankings video. Yeah, can't go wrong with this one. Number 13, The Fog, another John Carpenter film. John Carpenter's got a few films on this list. Another one I saw growing up, creeps me out completely. This has got a great soundtrack, one of the best soundtracks of all time for a horror film. And it's just extremely, extremely well made. I've never seen the remake, don't really want to. Makes me slightly sad that there are probably people out there who have seen the remake and they've never gone back and watched the first one. That's just tragic. Number 12, Asylum. So there's 2 horror anthologies in my top 100. The first was VHS way back at 39 or 40, and this one gets in at 12. This is my favourite. It's an Amicus film from the early 70s. I like all the Amicus films. I've got all of them on my shelf, but this is the standout. All the stories are great, and even the wraparound story is great. Number 11, we've got Tremors, just missing out on the top 10. I saw this just after it came out, 91, 92 on TV. The whole family enjoyed it. A few years after that, me and my dad rented number 2, and that was surprisingly good, given the fact that Kevin Bacon wasn't in it. And the best thing about the original was that chemistry between Fred Ward and Kevin Bacon. I didn't watch any more films after number 2 for many, many years. And then finally, I went on this streak of watching all these films where Burt Gummer's the lead, 3, 4, 5, 6. And there's a 7th one as well with him in it. He's like 70-something now. He's still doing them. But yeah, I'm going to get around to watching. I think it's called Shrieker Island. But you can't beat this original. One of the best horror comedies of all time. Number 10, Candyman. I saw this in 93 with my cousin and her boyfriend. And it scared the bejesus out of me. Yeah, it stayed in my brain for weeks, this film. It's so gory, it's scary. It's got a great soundtrack, great twist ending. The second film I've seen, but I didn't enjoy as much. It's not on the same level as the first one. The third one I've not seen at all. I will watch the remake, but, well, out of curiosity more than anything else, because I'm not expecting it to be anything even close to the original with Tony Todd. Number 9, Blair Witch Project, still for me, the best found footage film of all time. I've reviewed all 3 films in this series. You'll find those in my Blair Witch playlist. But the first film, head and shoulders above the rest, just as Candyman is in that series. I first saw this in my campus hall room when I was in the first year at university, and it had a massive effect on me. Number 8, The Descent. This is a terrific film about these girls who go potholing and then they get trapped down there. And then just to make matters worse, there's all these creatures down there with no eyes. Yeah, it's a fantastic movie. I think they botched up the ending in America. They put this happy ending on it, which didn't work as well. I hope they've got that sorted now for the Blu-ray and DVD releases and stuff like that. But there was a second film, which wasn't as good. It had to retcon the end of the first movie sort of thing just to be able to have a second one. It's watchable, but it's not in the same league. Number 7, Silent Hill. Probably the only film I can imagine some people might have a problem with me including it in my top 10, but I think it's one of the most underrated films ever made. It helps for me, I guess, that I was a fan of the games going into it. I saw it at the cinema with a mate of mine. Absolutely loved it. It's just, the CGI is really good all the way through. A bit flaky in 1 or 2 moments, but on the whole, it's good. Great story, great atmosphere. Love the Pyramid Head monster and how he's used. Got all this alternate timeline, alternate universe stuff, I should say, going on. Sean Bean's in it, who's very good. And I forget the name of this lady who plays the lead, but yeah, she was very good as well. There's a sequel, which wasn't as good, but it's still a decent film. I've got that one on my shelf. Didn't make the top 100. If I'd have gone down as far as 150, it probably would have made on. Number 6, Alien. If Aliens had made it on, hadn't fallen foul of that rule, I think Alien and Aliens would have been sort of side by side almost. They are great films. Not much more that can be said about this. It's one of the best sci-fi films of all time, and one of the best horror films of all time. And at the start, I thought it might come like second or third. There were more great masterpiece films than I realised when I started doing this thing on day one. Going into the top 5 now, it's getting exciting. The Thing, another John Carpenter film. He's got quite a few films in my top 100, especially as we get up towards the really great movies. And this is one of the best of the lot. It makes me sad that you just don't get practical effects like that for the most part anymore. There's a good prequel to this film, also called The Thing, bizarrely. Got Mary Elizabeth Winstead in it again. And if I'm going to watch these films, I will watch both of them, not just the 1982 version. It's a good story. You can watch them back to back. And it's a great film for talking about with other people, because there's so much to discuss about the film in terms of different theories about who gets infected at what points during the film. It's good that way. Right, number 4, we have the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So when it comes to this series, I've got the first movie like way up here in my estimations, only film on my list. All the other sequels, you won't find those on my list, way down there. Although, to be fair, I've not actually seen them all. And I've not seen the remake from 2003, which I'm led to believe is the one that's the closest in quality to the original. I will get around to it because I've just started reviewing them in my review series. I've done 1 and 2 so far. Number 3, we have Dawn of the Dead. I saw this late at night in the 90s, around about the age of 15, 16, and I knew halfway through the film that I was having a really special experience because it's just an amazing movie. I've seen it many times since. This movie made me a fan of the George Romero Dead franchise. The other films in the series I can enjoy, they're good, apart from maybe Diary of the Dead, that's a bit weak. But yeah, all the others are good, but this one is just an absolute masterpiece. For a while, this was my favourite film of all time across all genres. It held that title a little while, although I sort of knew coming into this list, this particular month, this particular year, that it wouldn't hold top spot. But yeah, it's a great movie. Now, the top 2 have been my favourite top 2 horror films for a long, long time in my life now, to the point where I don't think that they'll ever be beaten. One of them is Scream, the original Scream. It's got an amazing soundtrack. It's basically the film that sums up my high school years. It was just the film for that era, and I look back on it really, really fondly. It was such a good movie. It made me literally beg my dad to take me to see Scream 2 at the cinema, even though he wasn't into horror films, and I wouldn't have begged him to go and watch any other horror film at the cinema. And I'll just show you what's at number 1, and I'll come back to Scream, actually. Number 1 is Halloween. That's my favourite horror movie of all time. It was close. It was really close. And I wanted to put Scream on in the sense that, yeah, it's the film from my generation, whereas Halloween's before, long before that time, you know, way back in the late 70s. I think the reason, or the two reasons why Halloween just about pipped Scream, number one, I got into this series first around about 93. That helps. And secondly, I'm not sure you would even have Scream but for Halloween. So there is that as well. But I mean, those two films, I think, are comfortably ahead of Dawn of the Dead in third these days. And I can't see it changing. So there we have it. That is my top 100 films list. I'll just show you like one or two honourable mentions which just sneaked on. If I can scroll back up. One of them is Friday the 13th Part 3. That was on originally and then got kicked off when another movie came along. Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers, that was on. And just to prove that I really do like Jaws, even though it's not in my top 100, that almost made it on. And given the fact that I've probably seen thousands of horror films in my lifetime, even being considered for the top 100 makes it a really, really good film in my eyes. So there we have it. There's my top 100 list. Hope you enjoyed that. Subscribe if you haven't already. I'll be back soon. I'm hoping to do a top 100 films of all genres at some point. That will be challenging. But maybe not straight away. We'll see. But for now, hope you enjoyed that. I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.